Welcome to English Country Life and welcome to the November episode of our series, The Chicken Year Month by Month. November in England and the UK means we are going to be subject to flockdown arrangements, so we can no longer free range our chickens. So this is a special episode showing you what we're doing to keep our chickens both legally compliant and as safe as possible from the threat of avian influenza. Welcome, my name's Fiona and these are our wonderful Buff Orpingtons. Now at the moment, as you can see, they're still free ranging, but from 1 minute past midnight on the 7th of November, we in England have a legal obligation to keep these hens either inside or in a fully netted enclosure. Now that's designed to reduce the spread of avian influenza and of course to keep the chickens safe, but it is a legal obligation if you live in England. Now you may not live in England, you might be in the US, you might be in Australia, you might be in Scotland or Wales where restrictions aren't in place, but if you have an area which has been impacted by avian influenza, you might want to watch this video and take some cues and see what might work for you to keep your chickens safe. What we've decided to do is, because this is the 4th year that we've had to go through Flockdown, we have made some decisions about making what is normally a temporary housing arrangement into a more permanent structure. Although the chickens won't live in it permanently, we're not going to keep dismantling it and putting it back up each year. But let me show you first of all what the housing arrangements are and what the enclosure looks like, and then you can make a decision what's right for you. And this is going to be our winter enclosure, and actually it's polytunnel frames. That's all they are. They're very, very cheap frames. So as you can see, there's no polythene on them at the moment. We bought 3 which are 6 meters long by 3 meters wide and 2 meters high, but then we've also got an additional 3 meter long section which is left over from another project. What that means is our chickens now have a tunnel which is 21 meters long by 3 meters wide and 2 meters high. A great space. So they've got the opportunity to really get up some good speed by running up and down. They've got enough height they can fly up and down, and it means that actually it makes it easier for us to maintain because I'm not having to stoop coming into the area at all. I can just walk around and it's really very easy for me to do everything I need to look after the chickens in the space. But it's not my preference, it's not ideal. Now, why have we got the tunnel structure here? Well, part of it is convenience. It's a space which isn't used for much more. It does come into the garden a little bit, but not enough that it infringes on our pretty space where we sit out in the summer. But it is also very sheltered. We have got trees on essentially 2 sides. We've also got behind the camera, there's quite a high hedge stopping wind coming in this way. But it has to be said, wind doesn't come in the far end of the tunnel, so I'm not really concerned about that. But once the leaves are off the trees, this is a lovely space. It has enough light in winter. It's sheltered from the wind, as I say, but the trees over the top as well mean that the rain doesn't beat down as much as it would if it was in an exposed area. So it's a really pleasant space over winter for the chickens to be, because chickens hate wind in their feathers, they really do. So that was the main consideration for us. This area is probably the most sheltered area that we've got. We do have some maintenance with the surrounding trees to do. For example, here I have got some roses which are growing over the edge, and I need to cut those back because those could actually catch on the netting and pull it back. So I'm looking to remove any branches which could encroach on the netting and actually cause it to tear over the winter period. What I'm going to do now is show you some of that work, and then we're going to have a look at the enrichment things which I'm putting inside the tunnel, because in an enclosed space the pecking order can become more of an issue. And what we're going to do then, before we actually leave the video, is we're going to have a look at food and drink and what we actually need to do there to be compliant with the regulations. My plans for the day have completely changed. I was hoping to bring in the tractor tyre sand bath, put the rain cover on and put the high perch arrangement into the hoops before I put netting on tomorrow, but we've got a change in the weather. High winds are coming in tomorrow, the day after and the day after that. So today with low winds is my one day to easily put the netting onto the hoops. But I do have a job I need to do first. I need to make sure that the hoops are actually staked into the ground, and once the netting's on, they're not going to roll over if high winds come. So we use these 3-foot ground stake. Now sometimes they're called rope pins, but if you look in our Amazon storefront, and a link to that is in the description down below, you will find these. You might be wondering what I'm doing with the tape. Well, I'm learning from my mistakes of the previous years, and what I'm doing is I'm actually just putting a little bit of obvious tape around the top of the road pins, and that's because I have actually lost these in the undergrowth in previous years because they do blend in, but a tiny bit of tape there means I'm more likely to find it once it's hammered into the ground. And all I need to do is use a lump hammer, knock them in, and it's actually this U shape here which rests on the bottom bar of these polytunnel frames, so it actually works really, really well. And then the next job is for me to put the netting on, and we've been storing the netting from last year in this horse hay net. I actually finished putting the netting on with a head torch last night, but it wasn't too late. But as you can see at the moment, the ends to the enclosure are held open with releasable zip ties, and that's so we can get some large items in, which are the boredom buster enrichment items. So let's have a look at those next. One of the things which we've decided to move into the avian influenza winter enclosure on a permanent basis is this rain cover for the sand bath. So not only are we moving in one of the tractor tyres with the sand, we're moving in this cover too. Now, to be fair, it needs some repair. So what we've decided to do is Hugh has built the most amazing brand new rain cover that's going to go in the free range area permanently. That's now gone out, and I'll show you that in a minute, but this is in the workshop so that the windbreak at the back can have brand new tongue and groove put on the back. Up till now it's had a piece of plywood, but it's been out there for a few years and the plywood has degraded over time, so it needed to come in for repair anyway. But the tongue and groove that's going on the back should mean that it gives great robust windbreak for many years to come. And this is the new shelter which Hugh has made to cover the sand bath, and he's kept the best elements of the old design but improved it just that little bit. So what's he changed? Well, the roof is a little bit longer, and that means there's less likelihood of rain getting into the sand, so it's always going to be dry for the chickens to bathe in there. And he's replaced the plywood back with tongue and groove, which means it's a lot more robust. Now, why do we have a back on it? Well, we have a lot of wind, and the main wind here comes from this direction, so having that as a windbreak is really quite important to the chickens because they don't like wind in their feathers, it has to be said. But he has kept these struts on the side. Now, not only do these serve to make the structure a lot more solid, the chickens love to perch on these too, so it just makes it a lot nicer for them. But now we've got two of these rain covers for the sand baths. It means that this one can stay permanently in the field and the other one can stay permanently in the winter enclosure, and we don't have to hurt ourselves moving these heavy structures the whole time. And this is a sand bath that I need to dig out, and I've got to do it in 2 stages. So the first thing is get the sand out, then I need to move the tractor tyre. And you can see why I don't want to do this every year anymore. So what we've decided to do is 1 tractor tyre with sand is going into the enclosure permanently, and the other tractor tyre is staying out here. Now, to be fair, they don't use this one very much. It only gets used really in the height of summer when it's really, really warm. And they still prefer to be in the one which is sheltered with a roof over the top. So I need to get this into the enclosure somehow. Now, to begin with, I thought, I'll use these trucks. That seemed like a really good idea. And then I realised that the sand is so heavy that if this is filled with sand, I'm not going to be able to move it. I'm just not strong enough. So instead, I've been back and I've grabbed myself a load of buckets. And what I'm going to do is put a small amount of sand in each bucket. And I will have to make multiple trips to carry it in there, but at least to be able to do it without hurting myself. I'm more likely to hurt myself when it comes to actually moving the tyre, but I'll let you watch the comedy on film. So what was that all about? Well, this is the Omlet Poletree, and it's a multiple height perching system. And it's invaluable for the crested cream legbars who like to fly and jump up and gain some height to stop them being bored when they're in this enclosed space. The poultry is actually designed to be braced against the roof and the floor of an indoor covered enclosure. But because we're using these cheap polytunnel frames, I'd be a bit concerned that they're not robust enough to actually brace this perch unit. So we have built a frame for it, and we do have a video on how we did that, so you can have a look at that. What we have done is we've added some extra little bits, and we've got these hanging basket brackets which we can then hang things like cabbages or other treats to keep them happy. And that takes us nicely onto our next section, which is food and drink and what we need to do to be legally compliant there. Even though we've got a fully netted enclosure, there are requirements for food and water which we must comply with. And if you're in England, it's also a legal obligation to comply with these rules too. And it's simply so that food and water can't be contaminated with wild bird feces. And if you're in a netted enclosure, it could be that those could drop from the sky through the net. And if your food is exposed in any way, if your drinkers are exposed in any way, it can actually contaminate the food and water. So What can you do about it? Well, food and water could go inside the coop. That's the simplest thing to do. You could put them in shelters, and I'll show you one in a moment. For food, you could actually get a treadle feeder, because as you can see, food is not exposed. You can't see the food at all. The only time that food can be seen is when an adult bird steps on the treadle and lifts the lid. And even then, the lid provides protection for the food, so any feces dropping from the sky will not hit that food. So this is a compliant unit, and this is what we are going to be using within our fully netted enclosure. But let's have a look at drinkers. Drinkers also must be kept under cover, and this is where we keep ours. This shelter has been adapted to have a drinker inside, and if I just tip that up, you can see the drinker in the side there. But it's got a dual purpose because it's also got this high perch on there, so there's a certain amount of enrichment for the chickens as well, because they can fly up and play on this perch too. But don't forget, all water and food needs to be kept under cover. So what could you do if you don't have this kind of thing available? Well, you can put your drinkers and feeders inside a coop, or even just an adapted shelter. If you have a wooden crate which you can pop on its side, so there's an open end for the chickens to go in and out, the feeders and the drinkers could be inside there, and that's enough, as long as it can't have wild bird feces from the sky dropping down into the food and water. You will be compliant. I wanted to just circle back to the Omlet Poletree, because after talking about the food and drink, I thought you might be wondering, well, what's going to happen if we hang a cabbage on these hanging basket brackets? Because clearly feces could drop from the sky through the netting. Well, what we don't want to be doing is putting something solid over the top of the hoops, because it could act basically as a wind sail, and it could actually push the hoops over. But in small sections, I'm going to be adding a little bit of clear plastic just over the section where things like cabbages are going to be hung. And that means that anything which does come down from the sky isn't going to fall on those cabbages. It's a very simple solution. It only needs a small square over the top of this netting, and it does the job very nicely. It's been a lot of work to get to this stage, and we've still got some jobs to do. We clearly need to close the ends over the tunnel. Now, the end behind me has actually got an opening which allows us to push it back like a curtain so we can get in and out and look after the chickens. Hugh's setting up an electric fence around the entire area so that the chickens are still safe from predators. We've got bedding to put in the coops. We've got some shelters to bring in, which, to be fair, are quite light and can easily be moved around. And of course, on Sunday night, both of us need to bring the chickens in, so that by 1 minute past midnight on Monday the 7th of November, we are legally compliant. Now, if you're in England and you need to be legally compliant but haven't yet got everything organised, hopefully we've given you some ideas in terms of housing and enrichment for the chickens. But if you're not in England and want to reduce your risk of avian influenza with your chickens, hopefully you can make use of some of the items in this video too. If you have liked this content, please take a moment and give us a thumbs up down below. If you're not already a subscriber to the channel, hit subscribe and the bell icon, and you'll be notified of every new video as soon as it goes live. And that's a completely free service. If you've got a comment for us, or if you've got an idea for another video, pop it in the comment section and we'll try and get back to you and answer any questions you might have as soon as we possibly can. But for now, thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time.